I was just scrolling through my wife's phone. It wasn't anything out of the ordinary. She had left it on the kitchen counter while she ran out to meet a friend. I didn't mean to snoop, but then I saw it. The name in her messages, Lunch Buddy. I hadn't seen that one before, and I wasn't sure why, but my gut twisted in that familiar, ugly way. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was suspicion, creeping in like cold air under a door. I should have just walked away. I told myself I would. But then I saw the message. Just a few words, really? But it hit me harder than it should have. Can't wait for later, it said. I'm counting the minutes. I felt heat in my chest, but I didn't move. I slid my finger up the screen, one message after another. They were all like that. Little love notes, innuendos, talk of meeting up for lunch, except it wasn't lunch. It was an affair, and this guy, Lunch Buddy, worked at the same firm as her. The further I read, the more I felt like the floor was falling out beneath me. They weren't just messing around physically. She was talking about our future, our finances, our plans for the house. I don't know why, but that hurt the most. She was scheming with him behind my back, discussing things that were supposed to be between us. I didn't say anything, didn't even pick up the phone to confront her. I just sat there, stunned. All I could think about was how badly I had been played. And I knew, in that moment, I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. Instead, I started taking screenshots. I had no idea what I was going to do with them, but I had to keep them. I didn't trust her anymore, and I sure as hell didn't trust him. So I kept quiet, gathered the pieces, and told myself that when the time came, I'd be ready. I didn't know what I was supposed to feel. I'd spent all night sitting there, staring at those messages, trying to make sense of everything. By morning, I knew one thing for sure. I needed more. I started taking screenshots. The texts, the photos, anything I could get my hands on. My hands were shaking when I saved that first screenshot, but I didn't stop. I just kept clicking, my thumb moving in a blur across her phone, one conversation after another. I saved everything I could, just in case. The photos she sent him, the way she'd talk about me, like I wasn't even there, like I wasn't her husband, just some shadow in the background. It was all about him. Every text, every time she thought I wasn't looking. I noticed things about her too, little things, but enough to make me feel like I was walking around with a hole in my chest. She was more secretive. Her phone was always face down, always locked. She'd get texts, but she'd never let me see them. I used to just joke about it. You hiding something from me? But now it wasn't funny anymore. Her routine changed too. She'd leave early for work and take longer lunches. The phone calls at night, she'd go out of her way to step into the other room, like I wouldn't hear her talking. The constant work dinners, which I'd never questioned before, now felt like lies. She'd come back late, always exhausted, but her hair was perfect. Her makeup was fresh. But when I asked her about it, she'd just shrug, say she was busy, didn't have time to eat, and had to stay late to finish projects. I started keeping track of our shared finances too. I wasn't sure why at first, but then I saw the credit card charges. Expensive hotels, dinners at fancy places, stuff she swore was for work. But the dates didn't add up. The receipts were for dinners that lasted hours, sometimes until past midnight. Work didn't go that late. I kept everything. The receipts, the charges, the phone records. And every time I found something, I added it to a folder on my laptop. I was a graphic designer and it made sense. Everything I worked on had to be organized, neat, and precise. It was like I was doing the same thing here, but instead of marketing plans and layouts, I was collecting proof. Proof that my wife was doing everything I never thought she would. I saw him too. The guy. The lunch buddy. I didn't go looking for him, but I ran into him at work one day. He was there, standing near the printer when I walked by. We both froze for a second. I felt it, his eyes on me, trying to figure out if I knew. And for a split second, I wondered if he was going to say something. But he didn't. He just turned away. It was a little thing, but it burned. I couldn't bring myself to confront her. Not yet. I didn't know what I would say, how I would say it. I had to be smart. So I kept gathering. I didn't tell anyone. Not my friends, not my family. This was my fight and I had to handle it. I called a lawyer, though. One I found through a friend. A small office, nothing flashy. He was calm, asked me to send over all the evidence I had. I did, and when I sat down with him, he just looked at me for a long moment before speaking. "Keep quiet," he said. "Gather everything you can. Don't confront her. Not yet. When the time comes, you'll have your proof." I nodded. It felt like something heavy was settling into my chest. But I didn't show it. I just kept nodding, taking everything in. I wasn't ready for this to explode yet, but I wasn't going to let it slide either. I kept going. Texts, phone calls, the way she looked at me when she thought I wasn't paying attention. Every single detail. All of it started to feel like a string of lies, and I was holding the thread, just waiting for the right moment to pull. The silence between us grew in ways I hadn't expected. At first, I thought it was just the usual ebb and flow of life. She was busy, I was busy, we both had things going on. But over time, I started noticing the small shifts. The things I used to take for granted now felt off, like she wasn't really there. When she came home, she was distracted. She'd put her things down, barely a glance at me, and go straight to the kitchen or the bathroom. I'd try to start a conversation, but she'd give me one-word answers or look at her phone like she couldn't wait to leave. I didn't know if she was tired, guilty, or if she just didn't care anymore. I kept my distance too. I had to. I couldn't let her see anything. No suspicion. I was always polite, but I could feel it. Every time she touched me, or kissed me on the cheek, or said something that sounded too familiar, it felt like a lie. Everything she said felt like a script she was reading from someone else's life, not mine. I had stopped asking her questions about her day. The answers were always vague. Busy, nothing exciting. And I knew she wasn't telling me the truth. I didn't want to hear it anyway, so I focused on my own plan. I buried myself in work, in organizing the evidence. I'd keep it quiet for now, but when the time came, I would hit her with it all at once. I could almost taste the satisfaction of it, the moment I'd pull back the curtain on everything she'd done. At night, we'd lay in bed next to each other. I'd hear her breathing, and the only thing I could think about was how it wasn't real. How everything between us was built on a foundation of nothing. She'd roll over, her back to me, and I'd lie awake. I'd watch the dark shadows on the ceiling, trying not to feel anything. It was easier that way. If I felt something, I might break, and I couldn't afford to break yet. Her smile started to feel like a mask. I hated that. It made everything harder to process, harder to trust. We had dinners together, but they were hollow now. We'd eat, talk about mundane things, work, groceries, plans for the weekend, but there was this gap, this invisible thing between us. And the longer I went without saying anything, the deeper it seemed to get. Some nights, I'd catch myself thinking about how we got here. Was it always like this? Had I been blind to it? I used to believe in our marriage, or at least I thought I did. I'd believed we were building something real together. But now it felt like I was just a placeholder in her life, waiting for my turn to be discarded. I started getting cynical about everything. About our marriage. About my own role in it. What had I missed? How had I been so stupid to not see it? She'd always been a little distant, a little independent, but I convinced myself it was just her personality. Now I couldn't stop seeing it for what it was. Emotional withdrawal. I'd been so focused on the surface level, I never saw how far apart we'd really drifted. I was becoming someone else, someone I didn't recognize. I didn't want to be a victim, but at the same time, I didn't want to be the guy who turned a blind eye. I told myself that when the time came, I'd have my chance at justice. But deep down, I knew the real damage had already been done. The trust was gone, and no matter what happened next, that was something I'd never get back. I kept my emotions in check. I had to. If I didn't, I'd lose control. And control was the only thing I had left. So, I buried everything down deep, kept my face neutral. It was the only way I could get through each day without feeling like I was suffocating. She had no idea what was coming. I could see it in her eyes when we talked, that casual indifference. She thought she could keep going, keep playing this game, and I would just sit by, oblivious. But I wasn't. I wasn't going to sit by anymore. Soon it would be over, and when it was, she'd finally understand how much I knew, how long I'd known. And then, maybe, she'd feel it, the weight of everything I'd been carrying. Came one evening, just like that. She'd been distant for days, even more so than usual, but I didn't expect this. We were sitting at the kitchen table, eating dinner. She was poking at her food with a fork, not really looking at me, and I could feel the tension building in the air, thick and suffocating. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was steady, but I could tell there was something underneath. Guilt, maybe, or relief. "I think we should separate," she said, her words slicing through the air like a blade. I froze. It didn't feel like a surprise, but it did feel like a punch to the stomach. I looked at her, trying to keep my face neutral, even as my heart was pounding in my chest. "Why?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. "We've drifted apart," she said, glancing up at me. Her eyes were tired, like she had been rehearsing this. "I don't think we're happy anymore. I'm not happy. And I know you're not either." I sat there, staring at her. I didn't say anything for a moment. There was a part of me that wanted to scream, to demand the truth, but I didn't. Instead, I just nodded. "Okay," I said, my voice even. Calm. Too calm, maybe. "If that's what you want." She looked almost relieved, like the weight had finally been lifted off her shoulders. She seemed surprised, almost, like she thought I'd fight her, beg her to stay. "We'll sell the house," she continued, like she was reading from a script. "We'll split everything down the middle, like we agreed." I nodded again. Felt like she was talking about someone else's life. This wasn't my marriage. This wasn't my wife. "Yeah," I said quietly. "That sounds fair." I could tell she didn't expect me to be so cooperative. I don't think she thought it would be this easy. I didn't say much more. I didn't need to. It was happening and I wasn't going to stop it. But I wasn't going to let her get away with it either. Not like this. I kept my face blank as she talked about the logistics, the house, the moving process, how we'd split things. It all felt so cold, so final. And part of me felt this strange sense of powerlessness, but another part of me felt a simmering satisfaction, because I knew what was coming next. As soon as she moved out, I'd be ready. I couldn't make my move yet, not while she still thought she had the upper hand. But soon, very soon. That night, I didn't sleep. I went over everything in my head, what I needed to do next, what steps I had to take to protect myself. I called my lawyer first thing the next morning. He listened to the situation without saying much, then told me what I already knew. "Wait until she's gone. Don't make a move before then. When the time comes, file for divorce. You have everything you need to protect yourself. Don't back down." I agreed, feeling that familiar knot of anxiety in my stomach, but I also felt something else, relief. At least now I had a plan. I didn't have to act rashly or recklessly. I could wait for the perfect moment, play it cool, and then hit her with everything. The house, the bank accounts, the evidence I'd gathered. She wouldn't see it coming. I would make sure of that. And so I waited. Each day, I kept everything normal between us. I didn't press her for details. I didn't show any signs of anger, any sign that I knew what she had done. It was all part of the plan. She didn't deserve any kind of fight from me, not when I knew I had already won. When she moved out, that would be the moment. Everything would change and I'd be ready to strike. The day she moved out, I made sure everything was in place. I'd already gathered all the evidence. Text messages, photos, receipts. Everything that proved what she'd been doing. It felt like a weight was lifting, but it also felt like the calm before the storm. I couldn't wait any longer. I wasn't going to let her control this situation any longer. I filed for divorce that morning, after she'd left for work. My lawyer had prepared the papers, and I handed them over to the process server with instructions to deliver them to her at her office. I wanted her to feel it all at once. The betrayal, the truth coming down on her head. I needed her to know that I wasn't the one who was going to walk away from this. It was surreal watching it unfold. For weeks, I'd been walking this tightrope, gathering evidence, playing my part like a man waiting for the right moment to strike. And now, with the papers filed, I was finally free. I didn't think about it too much as I went through my day. I tried not to think about how she would react when she got the papers. I knew she'd be upset, shocked, even, but that wasn't my problem anymore. My problem was making sure I didn't get screwed over, making sure she didn't try to turn this around on me like she had done so many times before. The call came later that afternoon. It was her lawyer's office. They wanted to talk about the divorce, try to negotiate. I knew what they were going to say. They'd offer some half-baked settlement, try to make me feel like I was the one causing drama. But I wasn't interested in playing that game anymore. When I picked up the phone, I could hear the lawyer's tone. Calm, measured, like they were trying to put me at ease. "Mr. Richardson," the lawyer said, "we've received your divorce filing. We'd like to discuss a fair resolution here. My client wants to avoid a long, drawn-out process." I didn't waste any time with pleasantries. "I'm not settling for less than what's fair," I said. "She's got to own up to what she's done. You can take that back to her." There was a pause on the other end. I could almost hear the lawyer nodding, like they weren't surprised by my response, but they were still trying to negotiate. "I understand your position," the lawyer said, "but we believe we can come to an agreement without going to court. You're both entitled to half of the marital assets. We just need to." "No," I cut in. "I'm not agreeing to anything unless it's a fair split. And you can tell her the evidence is clear. She's not getting away with this." There was silence again. I didn't feel any satisfaction in it. Not yet. But it was coming. I knew I wasn't the one who had to beg or settle. She had to deal with this now. The lawyer finally agreed to schedule a meeting, but I knew they wouldn't be able to get me to budge. When I hung up, I felt a small rush of power. Not much, but it was something. I wasn't the one who was being manipulated anymore. The next few days were a blur. She tried to reach out to me, of course, texts, emails, even a few voicemails, but I ignored every single one. There was nothing left to say. She was either going to deal with the reality of what she'd done or she wasn't. I wasn't about to be her emotional safety net anymore. Not after everything. It was a weird feeling, not responding. A part of me wanted to tell her what I knew, wanted to confront her face to face. But that was the thing. She was used to controlling the narrative, used to pulling the strings. But now I had the power. I didn't need to say anything to her. She'd figure it out just like I had. I kept my eyes on the prize. A fair division of assets, a clean break, and the satisfaction of knowing that I had everything she tried to hide, all laid out in front of me. I wasn't angry anymore, at least not in the way I had been before. I was past that. What I felt was something colder, something final. She'd thought she could walk away from this without consequence. But now she'd have to face the consequences. And I would be right there, standing tall, making sure she couldn't twist anything to her advantage. The truth was on my side, and no matter how much she tried to spin it, there was no way out for her now. The day of the preliminary hearing felt surreal. I hadn't expected to feel anything at all. But there I was, sitting in that cold courtroom, my hands clenched into fists on my lap. I could hear my heart beating in my ears, but I kept my face calm, even though I wanted to jump up and scream. Her lawyer went first, of course. The guy had this polished, rehearsed way about him, like he knew exactly what to say to make everything sound better than it was. He painted me as this bitter, vengeful husband, twisting the facts, saying the marriage had been on the rocks long before she met the other guy. "Mr. Richardson," he said, looking right at me, "has clearly let his emotions get the best of him. The marriage was already falling apart when Mrs. Richardson sought comfort elsewhere. This is not a case of betrayal. It's a case of two people who simply grew apart." I wanted to stand up and shout at him that he was full of shit, but I didn't. I just sat there, staring ahead, letting him speak. I could feel the weight of those words, trying to land like they meant something. But they didn't. He could twist it all he wanted, but he wasn't going to change the truth. Then my lawyer spoke. Quiet, calm, but every word hit with the weight of a hammer. He pulled out the evidence, texts between my wife and the affair partner, all the photos, the financial records. He methodically laid it out, one piece at a time. There was no spin, no interpretation, just cold, hard facts. I watched as the judge's eyes widened when the financial records came up, the charges to our joint credit card, those expensive dinners, the hotel stays, the trips she had tried to pass off as work-related. The judge asked her direct questions. "Mrs. Richardson," he said, "can you explain these charges on your husband's credit card? Did you not discuss this with him at the time?" I could see her stiffen, but she didn't answer right away. The silence stretched out. She looked at her lawyer for a second, like she was hoping he'd bail her out, but he just nodded toward the judge, like he knew there was no way to get around it. She couldn't deny it. "Well," the judge pressed, "you used your husband's money for these expenses. What was the purpose of the trips? Work? Or was it something else?" Her eyes flicked nervously between the judge and the table, like she was trying to decide whether to lie or admit it. Finally, she stammered out, It was for work, but we didn't talk about it. I thought it was fine." The judge didn't let up. "So, you didn't think to discuss with your husband that you were using his credit card for a series of hotel stays, dinners, and trips? You didn't think it was important?" Her silence said everything. She couldn't answer. She knew the truth had already been laid out in front of her, and there was no way to twist it now. After a few more minutes of back and forth, the judge looked over the papers one last time, sighed, and finally spoke. "Based on the evidence presented, I'm ruling in favor of Mr. Richardson. You, Mrs. Richardson, will be responsible for reimbursing your husband for the $10,000 you spent during your affair. Additionally, Mr. Richardson will have full control of the retirement savings and a larger share of the equity in the home." I exhaled slowly, trying to keep my emotions in check. The relief was there, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like closure, like the truth had been exposed, and there was no more hiding. Her face fell. The anger that flared in her eyes was sharp, but there was something else too, a kind of defeat. She knew she'd lost. Her lawyer tried one last time to make a deal, suggesting a smaller settlement, but I wasn't having it. "No," I said, my voice steady. "The ruling stands. I didn't care about negotiating anymore. I'd spent too long keeping quiet, pretending like I wasn't watching her destroy everything we'd built. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about the truth, about making sure she knew that I saw her for what she was. I wasn't the one who was wrong in this marriage." When it was all over, I stood up, feeling like I'd been holding my breath the entire time. I didn't feel good about any of it. There was no joy in the win, just a dull ache that came from knowing everything was broken. The marriage, the trust, the years I'd given her. It was all gone, and no legal victory could change that. But she knew it now. She couldn't manipulate me anymore. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something close to peace. A few days after the hearing, the storm started brewing. At first, it was subtle, just a few cryptic posts on her social media. I wasn't really surprised. She'd always been the type to air her grievances publicly, but now it was different. She wasn't just sharing vague emotions. She was painting herself as the victim, claiming I'd financially abused her, manipulated her emotionally, and turned everything upside down. I stared at my phone, reading her posts, the sharp sting of her words landing like daggers. She talked about how she tried to make things work, how she was trapped in a marriage that had suffocated her, and how I had controlled everything from the finances to her emotions. It was like she was rewriting history. It wasn't just hurtful, it was infuriating. I could almost feel her watching, waiting for me to react. I could hear the quiet little voice in my head telling me to jump in, to set the record straight, but I couldn't. My lawyer had warned me, let the legal results speak for themselves. Don't engage. Don't play her game. So I stayed quiet. But that didn't stop the frustration from eating at me. I wanted to scream, to tell everyone the truth, to expose every little thing she'd done. My phone started blowing up with messages from friends and family. Some of them were in shock, asking if the things she was posting were true. Others were rallying behind me, telling me they knew exactly what had happened. But the worst part was the mutual acquaintances, people I thought were neutral. They started picking sides. Some were on her side, feeling sorry for her, believing her version of the story. Others supported me, but the doubt in the air was palpable. It didn't matter that I knew the truth. It didn't matter that I had proof. There was something about the public nature of it all that made everything feel messy. At work, it was worse. My coworkers, the ones who knew we were getting a divorce, had started gossiping. Some of them offered sympathy, but it wasn't always as sincere as it sounded. I heard whispers when I walked into the office, side glances, half-formed sentences. "What happened?" they'd ask, some of them genuinely curious, others just wanting to know the juicy details. I could tell a few of them were questioning my role in the breakup. Had I done something to drive her away? Was there something I wasn't telling them? It made my skin crawl. The way they looked at me, like I was the villain in some soap opera. I could have told them everything, could have explained why I was taking the stance I was. But what was the point? They weren't there. They didn't know the whole story. And I didn't owe them an explanation. I wasn't here to defend myself against their assumptions. Through all of this, I kept my focus. I moved into my new apartment, and every time I stepped into that empty space, it felt like a small victory. The place was small, but it was mine. It wasn't a reminder of her, of the marriage that had been, and it felt like I was starting fresh. The walls were bare, but I knew they would fill up with time, with things I chose, not things that were imposed on me. At work, I threw myself into my projects. I wasn't going to let this mess spill over into the one thing I had left, my career. I kept my head down, focused on the designs and the deadlines. I even picked up a few freelance gigs to help pay the bills. It wasn't easy, but it was a distraction. Kept my mind busy and my hands moving. Most of all, I kept telling myself the same thing. The truth was on my side. No matter how much she tried to twist it, no matter how many people believed her version of events, I knew the truth. And that was a quiet sort of power. It wasn't like I was basking in it, but there was something undeniably satisfying about knowing that she couldn't manipulate me anymore. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. The court had seen it. The evidence was clear. She couldn't take it back, and no amount of social media posts could change that. So, I kept my silence, focused on rebuilding my life, one small step at a time. Because that's what I had left now, my future. And I was done letting her control that too. The final settlement meeting was scheduled for that afternoon. I showed up on time, dressed in the same dark suit I'd worn to the court hearings, feeling like I was walking into some kind of corporate negotiation instead of the end of my marriage. When I stepped into the conference room, I could already feel the tension hanging in the air. She was sitting there, looking smaller than I remembered. Her face was pale, eyes tired, and her hair, usually so perfectly styled, looked limp and disheveled. The mess of everything, her affair, the divorce, the fallout, had taken a toll on her. I could see it in the way she slumped in her chair, the way her hands trembled slightly when she picked up the pen to sign the papers. Her sister, sitting next to her, was the first to speak up. She was still playing the defender, looking at me like I was the one who'd done something wrong. "This is unnecessary," her sister said, her voice sharp, almost pleading. "She's already been through enough. You don't need to drag it out like this." I didn't say anything. There was no need to explain myself. I didn't owe her sister anything, and certainly not an explanation. I just sat there, the silence stretching out between us. My lawyer sat beside me, quiet, as always, letting me take the lead. My ex-wife shifted in her seat. She glanced at me, her eyes softer than I expected. But there was something else there too. Guilt, maybe, or regret. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know I hurt you. I wish I could take it back. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I am sorry. For everything." The words hung in the air like smoke, thick and suffocating. I could feel the pull to respond, to say something, but I couldn't. Not after everything. I had no more words for her, no more space to give. I looked at her, but I didn't speak. There was nothing to say. She didn't need my forgiveness, and I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of a reaction. I signed the divorce papers in silence, my pen scratching across the page. I glanced at her as I handed them back to the lawyer, and I saw her glance at me, almost expectantly, like she wanted something more from me, some kind of final validation. But I didn't give it to her. I just stood up, folded the papers, and slipped them into my briefcase without a word. Her sister stood up too, but I was already walking toward the door. As I reached it, I heard her voice again, softer now, like she was talking to herself. "You're really going to walk away from all of this?" I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I'd already made my decision. I stepped out of the room and into the hallway, the door clicking shut behind me. For a moment, I just stood there, breathing in the stillness. I could hear the faint sound of voices from inside the conference room, but it was like they were a world away. The final chapter of my marriage had closed, and I was standing at the edge of it, alone. As I walked out of the building and into the crisp air outside, I felt nothing. Not triumph, not anger, not relief, just a kind of hollow quiet. It was over, and there was no satisfaction in that. There wasn't a single ounce of joy, just peace. The kind of peace you feel after a storm has passed, even though the damage has already been done. I made peace with the fact that I documented everything. It had been my only way to protect myself, to make sure I wasn't left in the dark, in the wreckage of a life I thought was secure. The truth was on my side, and no matter how much she tried to manipulate the situation, it wouldn't change that. But now, as I stood there in the fading light of the day, I knew that there was nothing left to fight for. It wasn't the kind of victory I had imagined. There was no sense of closure, no emotional high, just a long, drawn-out exhale. It was done. And as I walked to my car, I knew that this was the final step, the end. I'd been in the apartment for a few weeks now. It still felt strange, not in the way a new place does when you're excited, but in the way that only an empty home can feel. It wasn't just the furniture, or the boxes still scattered around, or the fact that everything was unfamiliar. It was the silence. The kind of silence that fills up every corner of your life when you realize you're truly alone. I was getting used to it, though. I kept telling myself that this was the start of something new, that I was rebuilding. Some days, that thought was enough to get me out of bed. Other days, I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I'd made the right choice, or if I'd been so consumed by everything that I'd missed something. I'd started going to therapy. I figured I might as well. My lawyer said it was good for my mental health, and I had to admit he was probably right. At first, I felt like I was just going through the motions, telling a stranger about my marriage and my divorce, but as the sessions went on, I started to feel like I was actually doing something for myself. I could feel the tension slowly start to drain from my shoulders, even if it was just a little at a time. The doubts still crept in. Sometimes, late at night, I'd wonder if I was wrong, if there was more I could have done to save things. But then I reminded myself of the truth that had been laid out in the divorce papers, the truth that was irrefutable. I hadn't been perfect, but I hadn't been the one to destroy our marriage. I wasn't the one who betrayed the other. Financially, I was fine. The home sale had gone through, and with the restitution from the divorce, I had enough to start fresh. It wasn't a windfall, but it was enough to give me a cushion. I'd started looking into investing the money, figuring out what I wanted to do with my future. Maybe some travel, maybe starting a new business. The world was wide open, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't scared of what came next. The emotional toll, though, it wasn't something that just went away. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't still carrying some of it with me. Trust was hard to rebuild, and I didn't know if I could ever look at relationships the same way again. Every time I met someone new, part of me held back, afraid they might turn out the way she had. But I wasn't going to let that stop me from trying to move forward. Then, one afternoon, I got a message. It was from a mutual friend of mine and my ex-wife. I hadn't heard from them since the divorce, and to be honest, I wasn't expecting much. But the message was simple. "I'm sorry, I didn't know the full story. I didn't realize what you were going through. I hope you're doing okay." It wasn't much, but it hit me in a way I didn't expect. It was a small gesture, but it felt like a piece of validation I didn't know I needed. Someone else saw me. Someone else knew that this wasn't just some messy breakup. It was something real, something painful. I didn't respond right away. I wasn't sure what to say. But after a while, I typed back a simple, "Thank you." It felt good to acknowledge it, even if it was just a small step forward. And so I kept going, one day at a time, Some days were harder than others. Some days, the loneliness felt heavy, like it was pressing down on me from all sides. But there were other days too, days where I saw glimpses of what the future could be. I wasn't done healing, and I knew it would take time, but I was ready. I was ready to start fresh, ready to take whatever came next. It wasn't a perfect life, but it was mine. And for the first time in a long time, I was okay with that.